Hey guys, on this episode of Thinking Caps, we have Scot McNealy, the poster boy for privacy. And we talk about walled gardens, the strength of Facebook, Google, Amazon, and others as the cookie crumbles. How's the small guy, how are the small brands actually going to have a fighting chance in this advertising landscape? Scot has a great perspective and he has some advice for you if you're CEO or working at a brand on how you have to get your own zero-party data built. Check this out. Hey guys, welcome back to Thinking Caps, where we talk everything digital, consumer, privacy, data, etc. I'm Tim Glom. I'm here with Richard Jones, our CMO at CHEETAH Digital, and we have a special guest, my former boss.
My former boss.
Oh.
And about 25,000 other people's former boss.
The great Scot McNealy is joining us from Scot. It looks like you're on the road. Where are you right now?
I'm trying, this whole privacy thing has me all freaked out, so I'm trying to get off the grid. I'm in a rented RV in Orlando. So, true story. I mean, if you look back there, I don't know, there's the driver's seats, and it's actually pretty fun.
Well, we're on a satellite encrypted uplink with Scot right now, and the FBI is tracking us, so we're going to be quick. But no, thanks for taking the time, Scot.
I'm not really in Orlando. Don't tell anybody.
He is not golfing somewhere. So, but Richard, you have quite a few things. We're excited to have Scot on because obviously Scot has been dealing with privacy and consumer privacy and all kinds of things for decades, and has a great point of view and perspective on things. Why don't you kick it off? Because I know you're chomping at the bit.
Definitely, I will. So, for those that don't know in the audience, the younger ones perhaps, Scot was the co-founder and CEO of Sun Microsystems, which was, as many of the older folks will know, a legendary company in Silicon Valley. Was one of the big, 3 or 4 companies that really made Silicon Valley in the 80s and 90s. And I want to take you back, Scot, down memory lane to January 1999, and I think for the sake of the audience, I'm going to read out a couple of paragraphs here from an article that was published in Wired magazines, named "Sun on Privacy," quotes, "Get over it," which caused quite a bit of stir. And obviously, the Wired was just one of many publications that actually cover this. But it was the chief executive officer of Sun Microsystems said Monday that consumer privacy issues are a red herring. "You have zero privacy anyway," Scot McNealy told a group of reporters and analysts Monday night at an event to launch his company's new Ginny technology. Get over it. McNealy's comments caused quite a stir.
I wish I was there.
I wish I was there as well. What do you remember about that, Scot?
I remember back then that was heresy, and everybody, people used to keep source code confidential because that was the corporate jewels, and people would keep their data private, and it was just considered absolutely heresy. And what was I saying, and was I part of the problem? And I remember my chief privacy officer having a conniption, just like, what? It was totally unscripted. I was just up there talking, and somebody was asking a question, I think, in the audience, and I just kind of said it. I told all 4 of my boys growing up, you have no privacy, get over it. Everything you do is going to be captured digitally, and it'll be a digital tattoo, and you're not getting rid of it. So just understand that and operate your life as if you are under constant surveillance, and it's all being recorded, and it could go viral at any moment.
And that, of course, is sound advice. But I doing a little bit of a research to what was printed in the media. I mean, people were queuing up to bash you over to the head.
I was right, wasn't I?
You were right. There's no question. But I find it quite interesting that with that comment, it caused quite a little bit of a stir. You've got politicians, you've got journalists, you've got all sorts of people that are up in arms about how dare you say this about privacy. But yet not a huge amount happened. A lot of talk, but not a huge lot about happened really until fast forward almost 20 years to early 2018 when the Cambridge Analytica news hit, when it was revealed that they had harvested personal data from millions of Facebook profiles without consent, and then were selling it to folks that were driving political ads over it. And the fallout of that was obviously huge. But what I wanted to ask you was, with Zuckerberg getting hauled up in front of Congress, was it nice to see someone else getting pulled up in front of Congress?
I've been out of the CEO piñata for about a dozen years now, and I don't miss it. And especially now, there's just almost no way you can win. I'm not sure I would have handled the questions the same way that Mark did, but you know what? He's richer than me, so maybe he's got better answers than I do.
Now, did you ever think that it would take, that it would be that length of time, almost 20 years before, privacy becomes such a hot topic politically, and that actually, the furore that was sort of addressed to you at the time was sort of small potatoes in many ways to what has happened, since that Cambridge Analytica scandal?
Yeah, I'm surprised, but I still don't think the conversation has matured and truly understands what the real culprits are, what the real problems are. If I had been Zuckerberg, I'd have been up there and said, listen, if you're using my service for free, you're not the customer, you are the product. Your data, who you are, and what you're doing, that is the product. You get to use it for free. So go read the terms and conditions of signing up for Facebook. Go read the terms and conditions of any of these social networks. Go read the terms and conditions of Netflix, of every, there are, you better read them carefully because, if you're getting stuff for free, you're the product. And
there's a cost.
The piece that, absolutely, there's no free lunch. And the other thing is, people are all worried about businesses having your data. Well, I'm way more worried about the government having my data, because the government is doing my healthcare now, is doing my education, they're doing my personal security, they're doing my rights enforcement, they're doing my financial loans, all kinds of stuff. And the ability, whether it's FISA warrants or IRS audits or student loan forgiveness, or what healthcare I get, and am I, what does the death squad say? I'm way more worried about the government having my personal data than I am Facebook, because you know what? I just don't use Facebook.
They won't find you in that RV, Scott. I think you're in the clear. So, but I guess the thing that is interesting for me about the time lapse between the last privacy, between your quote, you have no privacy, get over it, and now, is the sophistication in the devices that consumers are carrying around in their pockets with their smartphones. We can swipe, type, speak and shoot to pass data between us and governments, us and brands, us and whoever else might be listening. So I think privacy now has taken on a whole new dimension just because of the sheer volume of data that can be collected around us as citizens and consumers.
It's not just your phone, which basically tracks your every move, your every app you open, every thing you buy, every person you talk to or text to or email. It's just stunning how much activity comes from this little device, right? It's all captured by either the app maker or the phone company or the phone manufacturer. But it's not that only, it's the fact that everywhere you walk, there are microphones, sensors, there are cameras, there are autonomous vehicles, everything. There's an Uber company. Everybody is tracking just about everything that is going on in your life. Somebody once said you have no privacy, get over it. If you really step back and think about it, you really do need to get over it. And so the real issue is there any way to create data that is yours and yours only? And our company's going to start offering as a feature, hey, we will give you your data, we won't take your data, and we will pay you for access to your data. That would be a nice win. Are we going to have governments regulate that? I doubt it, unless governments are willing to say they're going to pay me for my data when they're going to snoop on me or whatever. It's going to be challenging. But then the second argument is, when are we going to all get smart and get a smaller government And third, when are we going to really understand the power of zero-party data and an explicit contract between me and the business about what my data is and what it is used for?
That's a great point, and
Yep.
something that, you know, people that follow you on social media or have seen you on your TV interviews of late will know that you're a big proponent of. And, you know, zero party data, something we talk about in this podcast
All the time.
quite a bit, is, you know, where brands are asking data from consumers, explicitly from consumers, about their motivations, their desires, their interests, in order for that brand to better serve them with products and services and marketing messages and what have you. But it's, as you say, it's an explicit transaction directly between brand and consumer, with a value exchange. And, you know, actually something that we're really bullish on here that we've talked a fair bit about is, you know, what is that value exchange? And, you know, zero party data, many people are doing many different things, everything from, you know, personalized product recommendations in return for data through to, you know, chances to win something, instant win or sweepstake or whatever it may be. But actually long term, loyalty frameworks are the real way that a brand can actually define that value exchange in return for data, repeat purchases and engagement. And so we're very much bullish on loyalty as this construct for how brands and consumers can engage.
Well, it makes a lot of sense, because especially if you start to ask consumers what they care about in loyalty. And I have some great stats that we're going to release in the next month that talk specifically around how people think about loyalty. And hey, Scott, I've got a question for you. I'm going to put a pop quiz that I'm asking a few people this week. I'm going to ask you, how many loyalty programs do you belong to right now off the top of your head? In some way, shape, or form.
Me or my wife? Me or my wife?
All right. So now this is a great point, right?
The royal we.
Because most advertisers, I'm just going to segue for a second. Most advertisers, I come from the television space where brands are buying programs. They're not buying people, and they certainly aren't buying individuals. They're buying audiences. So if Scott, normally a television brand advertiser would say, what's your household look like? So Scott brings up a great point that you can have two people under one roof, which is a traditional metric right now that's being bought and sold against, that is dead if you go zero party data route. So I'm going to ask you first, Scott, how many do you belong to?
Probably the most important one, and this will sound great for not really a billionaire, although people think I am, Southwest Airlines. I fly enough on Southwest, seeing the boys going to the boys golf tournaments and stuff. I have companion status, so my wife flies for $5. So that's a huge win. Costco's another one. I have a Costco card, and every year we buy so much through Costco, they walk us out to the car with our check to make sure we're safe when we get our little rebate.
Well, that's because you're Scot McNealy too. I wish I had that, but okay. So there's two. Do you think you have maybe one or two more, or is that kind of where you end personally for loyalty?
I have BJ's Restaurant. I got a loyalty card there, so I got a free Pizookie, and literally my wife and I went there to get the free Pizookie. It's just nuts. It's like a awesome. $7 dessert, and we got a free one, so we went. I probably have a few more. I just
okay. So
don't know.
So here's where you fall. Let's put you in we're going to say you have 4, because you named 3 and you probably have some more. 35% of U.S. consumers belong to 4 to 10 loyalty programs.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Wow.
I mean, think about that. And then 50%, this stat that we're going to show on the screen here, 50% say that they only belong 1 to 3, and then 7% belong more to 10. But what I think is really important there is not just the amount of people that are in the loyalty programs, but the fact that every consumer is familiar with a loyalty program of some sort, but some brands aren't. Some brands do not have a loyalty strategy, whether it's a platform and a real program. They don't have anything. And there's another stat I want to share with you, Scott. Take a guess. How many people do you think, on average, percentage-wise in America, have said, hey, look, I buy from a certain brand, but I'm not loyal to that brand because the brand has never asked me to be loyal? How many people you think said that they fall into that category?
Probably all. I think everybody's had that challenge.
Well, our stats say that 27% of people would be loyal to a brand, but they're not because the brand doesn't have a loyalty platform or doesn't have a program. So I think that's also nuts. I think brands are leaving things on the table. They're not collecting the right data. They're not putting, a one-to-one communication and relationship together, and they're not creating loyalty to keep those people retained and turn them into advocates.
I would go further than that and say that of the loyalty programs that are there today, the majority of those loyalty programs are really around points for purchases. And actually with Google, signing away the death warrant for the cookie in the next 2 years, following similar moves by other browsers, plus all this privacy legislation, delivering personalized marketing is getting extremely disrupted through traditional digital marketing techniques. And so that really does put the onus on brands to get this direct relationship with consumers in order to collect the data with which they can personalize marketing. And I think loyalty platforms, loyalty frameworks have as much, are the vehicle now to do that. So rather than just points for purchases, brands need to deliver experiences and they need to provide a value exchange in return for that data around motivations and desires, not just get points off a purchase.
Well, wait till you guys see. I'm gonna launch this report. I'm working on it right now. We're gonna launch this report soon that tells you exactly what U.S. consumers and frankly people across the globe. We have many different regions: APAC, EMEA, Europe, etc. We're gonna tell you what they actually want from a loyalty program. That's coming up soon. But go ahead. I know you have other questions for Scott, and I have one that I really want to answer today before he goes.
Yeah, a quick question for you, Scott. Obviously with the various different senators in the US and talking about privacy legislation that they want to put in and different governments around the world coming up with their own formats of privacy legislation. What do you think ultimately will win? Will it be legislation around privacy that drives behavior, or will it be the fact that consumers will choose whether they want to work with brands that snoop on them or those brands that give them a value exchange? Where do you sit on this? Is there room for regulation, or should it be just good practice by marketers?
I'm a small government guy, and I have very little faith that the absolute technology Luddites in Congress have any chance of keeping up. Technology moves at the speed of light, and technology has the shelf life of a banana, and Congress moves at the speed of Congress. There couldn't be a bigger mismatch. And Congress tends to do things if somebody pays them money so that they can buy votes and stay in power rather than do the right thing. And by the way, Congress and the government are the problem here. They're the scary ones to have data. They're running around. They're the arsonists running around yelling fire and blaming the businesses, the private sector, when they're the biggest issue. And by the way, my thought about you have no privacy, get over it, everything is a digital tattoo. It's true. There is nobody who has ever been able to delete an email except Hillary deleted 35,000 emails and nobody's ever found them. That's the only time that has ever happened. She's brilliant. She should be president of the United States because she's the only one that can actually do that. But
I got one for you on that. That is a segue. So let's say, put your CEO hat back on, right? You're Mark Pritchard at P&G.
Do I have to?
You're somebody at American Airlines. Right? Yeah. Who wants to be the pinata? But these companies have to make decisions. They have to do business. And the impending legislation right now, it looks like there's some states rolling some things out, which is a nightmare, right? No CEO can keep up with 50 different laws. So if it's one federal law, fine, who knows what's going to happen. But a question only you can answer, I think. Will the government write these legislations in a way that it allows them to continue to collect the data and everything that you're worried about the government? Or will the government eat their own sauce, and will you be able to opt out of all the things that the government's collecting on you right now as a personal? Do you think that will actually come to pass?
Absolutely not. The government is absolutely wanting to be in charge, absolutely want to be in control. Now, there's a few random people with their heads screwed on, right, who argue for a more libertarian, let's protect your rights, not protect your outcomes. It's just not going to happen. And I think that if private sector is smart, they'll start offering that explicit opt-in for value with explicit value in exchange for access to the data, whether you value the data. Somebody's gonna make a lot of money creating some sort of blockchain portfolio of private data that any citizen can have and own of their own data, and that they can sell to the highest bidder if they don't particularly care if that data is out and used. So it'd be nice if we had those options. I don't know whether scary regulations are going to force people. The problem with regulations, every time the government regulates, it becomes very difficult to compete. Small businesses can't compete, and you end up driving and creating monopolies. Governments like monopolies because monopolies have a lot of money, and they pay bureaucrats a lot of money to protect their monopolies. Look at Wall Street, for instance. And then the politicians have a way of raising campaign donation monies and lots of redistribution entitlement money that they can use to buy votes and stay in power. It's a horrible, horrible corrupt circle that we get that gets us hurtling towards 50% of the GDP in the government sector.
It's actually an interesting point. We did a podcast a couple of weeks ago where I was referencing a Digiday article that was covering a working group of the IAB that was basically trying to figure out, with the cookie now, being consigned to the dustbin of history, what's going to be the new identifier for the web. And so they were looking at, some combination of email and phone number. It has to be a first-party data identifier. And Digiday was making the point, and I think it is a valid one, that actually this change, this privacy regulation, and attitudes to change with the way it's being implemented at the moment, is going to reinforce the strong against the small and the weak. So Facebook, Google, Amazon, that have huge logged in consumer bases and have all of that first party data, are going to get strengthened, and smaller publishers, smaller ad tech players, smaller agencies that don't have that logged in consumer database are the ones that are going to be
they're going to be back to buying demographics. They're going to be buying blocks of people with no intelligence, no personalization, no anything.
Which is why Mark Pritchard, Chief Brand Officer of P&G, came out in September to the ANA saying, the walled gardens, the Facebook, Google's, Amazon, they're never going to share their data. So we're taking our own future into our own hands and building out a database of consumers, which is 1.3 billion strong. And I think that's the future. We work with enterprise brands, so they tend to be quite large, but even enterprise brands are now having to make that decision, play catch up, build out their own first party database, and own that direct consumer relationship.
Well, it's crazy because even small brands, I mean, we have some clients that are fairly small in the big scheme of things, and they're taking their own audiences to Google, to Amazon, for Facebook, for one-to-one matching. So they're able to match literally down to people with red hair and size 9 shoes if they want, but it's based on explicitly declared zero-party data. So cool. I think Scott agrees with us, Scott, that if you're a brand, you're a CEO, you're a CMO, you're somebody who's responsible for privacy compliance, of which regulation, we have no idea what that's going to look like. But to get ahead of that street fight, because it really is going to be a street fight when the regulation comes down, your best investment is to not drive through it in an armored car. Your best investment is to fly over that street fight. And the way to fly over that, in my opinion, is build your database of explicitly declared opt-ins with the right terms and conditions, a one-to-one, clear, transparent relationship. That way, whatever legislation comes along, you're going to be compliant.
Right, and have that structure of that value exchange with the consumer, so that they keep giving keep giving you more data over the customer life cycle, and you can actually build repeat purchase and a higher customer lifetime value. That has to be the construct, I think, of the future. Otherwise, you are in hook, to Facebook, Google, and Amazon, forever and a day. And look, we've just seen how much of ad price has been going up on Facebook. It's nuts. And this is a world that I think any marketer doesn't want to get caught in. You've got to own your own direct-to-consumer channels these days.
So, Scott, what's your other advice you have for CEOs grappling with this and trying to get ahead of the future? It's cloudy. They don't know what to do. What other advice do you have for them?
Well, I think you guys are on the right issue, and that is you got to have a direct one-to-one with your consumer. And the whole concept of using digital advertising with Facebook and Google now, what are they, 2/3 of the digital advertising nut? And then you throw in Amazon, which is eating the world, and everybody else is basically SOL. And they're going to have to figure out how to get directly to their consumers. And I would certainly, if I was not one of those three companies, would not trust the legislators to write small to medium-sized business friendly legislation. They're going to write Google, Amazon, Facebook friendly legislation, because guess where all their campaign donation money is coming from? Those companies.
Well, and just tax revenue and everything else is coming through there. I totally agree. I think one of the big hurdles we're going to have to tackle soon as a topic is, how much do we trust Facebook with my audience? If I'm Mark Pritchard and I got 1 billion people in my database, how safe do I feel saying, hey, Facebook, just match these people up, and please don't give my data to anyone else or make any lookalikes or do anything else with it. Just use it to do a one-to-one advertised match. And I think that's where the trust is going to fall apart with a lot of these brands.
Well, if these brands have very, very large audiences that build up, they have some power in that conversation.
Sure. Yeah, the Pritchard of the world doesn't have a problem, but the smaller one who has 100,000, 200,000 direct-to-consumer startups, where Dollar Shave Club was when they started, I think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny. And I think these platforms, these walled gardens, they need to have a transparency plan for brands to say, hey, look, your data is safe. It's in a black box. Axiom used to do that, and that went away with Twitter and no longer using that data. But they're going to have to come up with some sort of transparent box, and it's going to be interesting to see.
It will be interesting to see how these attitudes change. But Scott, I got one more question for you that I find really interesting, seeing how this whole market has played out. Seeing Zuckerberg getting pulled up in front of Congress, and I watched a whole bunch of that stuff, which I thought was fascinating, just made me think, you're the only other person I know that has had a similar situation, being in front of Congress. You were there famously with Bill Gates. What's it like being in the spotlight of Congress, the politicians, as Zuckerberg has been?
I guess what's most startling, and I hate to be negative about government, but I'm trying to find positives with our government, and it is how out of touch, how silly their questions are, how just absolutely clueless they are about what's going on in the marketplace. And it's kind of scary that we let them regulate and manage as much of the private sector as we do. And I think the invisible hand and smart consumer choices are what make good answers, not some elite, out of touch person trying to stay in power in the government. So that was the most startling part. I mean, there was Strom Thurmond. I mean, they held cards up for the poor guy, and the font size was like this big, so that he could read it, and he didn't know what he was reading.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about on that one. Interesting.
Well, Scott, it's a pleasure having you on the podcast. Well, it's great having someone that doesn't pull their punches, right? You don't have to worry about Scott not saying what he feels, which is what people want. They want to hear authenticity. So thank you very much.
I want one more thing from Scott. If we have anybody here, we've probably been on for 20 plus minutes. If we still have them, how is Mav doing? Maverick was an intern for us at Weigh In years ago, and now he's on TV. I'm seeing him when Saturday mornings. How's he doing? Yeah, and how's your caddying job going?
And that's just not any McNealy. That's Scott's son. Maybe for those that aren't golf fanatics.
How's it going?
He's doing great. All four of my boys are doing great. They're all just wonderful kids. He's the first one off the payroll. He's solidly off the payroll. He made $145,000 last weekend. He's made over $1 million in his first 3 years of prize money. He's 56th on the FedEx Cup. And I want all of you out there, and if you care about education, he is supporting Curriki, CURRIKI.org, which is we're building a new platform to basically allow the flipped classroom to happen, and to allow content creators to have a common standard open platform on which to build courseware. And for every birdie he makes, people are pledging. And right now he's got hundreds of people who have pledged. And every time he makes a birdie, Kariki gets over $750, and we're trying to get that number up to about $5,000 per birdie that he makes out there on the PGA Tour, and he's making a lot of them. Yeah, I think he was fourth in the fall for most birdies. And last bit of daddy bragging, he's got a streak of 11 straight cuts made, I believe, which is 10th on the active list of cuts made. Not bad for a rookie. And he is the leader in 34 rounds of 72 or better. He's just by far got the longest active streak of that. So he's doing quite well. He's off the payroll.
All right, glad to hear it. We're watching him on TV, man. It's great. It's great to hear, and a great cause behind it too.
And we shall let's drop links in for people want to learn more about Kariki. We'll do that into the into the post, so folks can take it on themselves to learn more as well.
Watch their money grow on Saturday mornings. I love it. Well, Scott, thanks for coming on, man. We're gonna have you on, obviously, more. Scott bounces around wherever he's going to be. He'll be on the moon next. Pull you in from the moon.
You'll have to use my encrypted email, because I'm going off the grid. Since I got outed here in Orlando, I'm going to have to move my my RV operations vehicle. So
we'll send smoke signals.
Yeah, when you come off the grid, let us know. We'll take it in the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, see you soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Scott.